Hello, thanks for joining me on another episode of Why Not Go, the channel dedicated to rock and roll, especially punk and the Sex Pistols. And I appreciate everyone watching and commenting. Well, today I'm doing this video on September 24th to mark a very important gig in rock and roll and Sex Pistols history. And it just so happens that today, September 24th, the Sex Pistols are playing in Manchester at the Manchester Academy with Frank Carter, of course. And then on Thursday of this week, they're playing in Kentish Town. So it seems like most of the comments I've seen have been very positive. I would definitely go if I lived in England, and I'm happy for Steve, Paul, and Glenn. They look like they're having a great time on stage. Well, some of you might wonder, like, what happened September 24th? That wasn't the punk festival. Well, I'm kind of, as I said, just doing this short video. I'm calling it On This Day. I might do more in the future regarding important dates in Sex Pistols history. And it's kind of like my first Sex Pistols video, which I uploaded earlier this year on January 11th. And that was to mark the anniversary of the date 46 years prior, where when the Sex Pistols were on tour in America and when I was following them. And January 11th was the show at Kane's Ballroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's on my Sex Pistols playlist if you want to see it, Sex Pistols on Tour. Well, today, 48 years ago, September 24th, the Sex Pistols played a small club called the 76 Club in Burton-on-Trent. And Burton-on-Trent, I've never been there. It's I guess, smallish city, about 30 miles north of Birmingham, close to Nottingham. And they rolled into town on this day 48 years ago. And I'll show a picture here with the way that the place looks now. I think it's empty. And the 76 Club was on 76 High Street in Burton-on-Trent, and it opened in 1960. And the Beatles wanted to play there, but that was kind of interesting history that I read. But the Beatles were turned down by the club manager. I guess they weren't popular enough at the time to play this small club. So it was a rock club for many years. I think it closed around 2000. The Sex Pistols played in September. A month prior, AC/DC played the same club, August 6th. And the reason why I think this date is so important is because a live album was recorded at this on this night. And I have this record. I've been playing it for a very long time. Sorry about the glare. And I think originally it was called Anarchy in the UK LP. They have pictures of Sid here. Obviously he wasn't in the band at the time. And then it's the set list there in the back. And I just love this album. I think I play it probably at least once a week. It was recorded pretty well. The sound is good. And I think at this point in their career, they had quite a few original songs. They played 10 original songs and 4 covers, and they just sounded like they were on fire. This is another record. I think there's several records that have come out on this gig. This is another one. I like this one better because this is the full set list, full songs in order. Whereas this one, the original Sex Pistols Live, is the same night, but they only had 11 songs on this one, so the other album is more complete. So I'll just show some photos from this night. Only about 40 people attended this show, much like many of the shows that they played in 75 and 76. And I'll show some photos. It looks like it was a very small club. It looks like the stage was maybe this high off the dance floor. And it looks like, you know, they all look fantastic, and I know they sounded great. And I love the photo that I'll show in a bit. I love the photo where you see a couple in they're in a booth and just kind of almost behind the stage, and they're just kind of looking over at what's happening on stage, like, what's that? So I'll show some photos here, and I just want to read the liner notes on the albums. I believe Dave Goodman recorded this concert, and these are the liner notes that he writes on this record. I remember clearly being at this gig and thinking to myself that this has to be the best live band in the world at this moment. They were electrifying. They played with the fervor of one possessed with a passionate hate of bullshit music. At the time of this recording, punk was in its infancy, and Burton-on-Trent was one of the band's first expeditions to the north. There is no way that this audience could have any idea what they were about to experience unless they had already ventured down to a London gig. What was interesting was the way they always managed to shock the audience into some kind of response, be it positive or negative. From the audience's response, this record, you can tell that they won over a few friends while making a few enemies. Yeah, you do hear some audience noise. Most of it is positive, though. Because of this, the band were regularly performing. Because the band were regularly performing, this recording has captured them at their musical peak. The Sex Pistols' early attitude to their sound was just to turn everything up full, and they always managed to overload every piece of equipment they use. Should you also notice any pops or jumps, it's just the mixing desk frying or throwing up. Not to worry, we stuck it back together again with safety pins. So that's what Dave Goodman wrote about this album. And he was obviously at that gig. He was their sound man. And I just want to read the liner notes, and I'll show some more photos from this album. The liner notes are from Alan Parker. He has the Filth and the Fury Sex Pistols fan club. And he says, the Sex Pistols, a bunch of kids with revolution in mind, played over half the gigs they ever would as a working unit that summer. They played all over the country, 7 squashed in a transit van, just about everywhere anyone would see them. The summer of 1976 was the hottest on record in the country for 100 years. Wow, that's amazing. With a large dollop of hindsight, any Pistols fan worth his or her merit will tell you now that during that long summer, the group played a Tuesday night residency at the 100 Club, which came down to earth with a crash following the punk festival. They were also paused, just to mention, the Chelmsford prison gig. That was September 17th, and Notre Dame Hall, November 15th, as the two of the best remembered gigs by the group that year in London. But take them out of the capital and see where they mention first. It might be Manchester, but only because they shook some like-minded kids into forming their own bands. It wasn't Scarborough, Sheffield, Nottingham, or my hometown of Blackburn. Although they played in each and every one of these places and many besides. What they will tell you is that September 24th, 1976, the Sex Pistols, still a full 3 months away from a recording deal with EMI, played the 76 Club in Burton-on-Trent, a town that almost suffers from being lost in the middle of nowhere. The reason Pistols fans, old and new, remember so fondly a gig played to little more than 40 people in a place most would have to look up on the map is simple. Over the years, the show has been chopped up, edited, etc. It has been castrated in the name of art by hundreds of record companies, when all we ever wanted, honest gov, was just the gig to be played that very warm late summer night on Burton-on-Trent. Well, I've got some great news for you, my people. This is it. You are now holding a gem of a release. It's taken 23 years to get it right. And then he goes on to say it includes problems in satellite. I guess they weren't on the earlier album. And for some reason, the Pistols, no one thought that the Pistols fans should have a right to hear. So this is great. And then he ends by saying, how much more live would you like it to be? Alan Parker. So that's why I love this record, because it really just plays the concert from start to finish, and you really feel like you're there. And I think one of the things that a lot of people maybe they know, I don't know, maybe they don't know, is that the Sex Pistols played a lot of shows in 1976. They weren't banned until the Grundy interview in the beginning of December. But in 1976, they played 68 shows in Great Britain. Isn't that amazing? They played 68 shows. The Burton-on-Trent was the 47th show that year. And considering that they were banned in early December, and the Anarchy Tour was, most of the gigs were banned in December, they played those 68 shows, mostly being banned in December. So it means they were playing like 5 or 6 shows a month. So Malcolm really had them going, like, up and down, north and south and everywhere. Like when they played the 100 Club for the Punk Festival, that was September 20th. And then the very next night, September 21st, they were in Cardiff, Wales. And then the next night, September 22nd, they were in Newport, Wales. And then the next night, the 23rd, they were in Swansea, also in Wales. And then the 24th, they were in Burton-on-Trent at the 76 Club. So they played 68 shows. I always find that amazing, isn't it? You want to kind of go back in time, I do, and see some of them. But I really think that they really, it's like they planted seeds in the country, all over the country, because I think so many of the young people that saw the Sex Pistols and like them, I think a lot of them started their own bands. And it's almost like they planted the seeds of a new musical revolution, cultural revolution, whatever you want to call it, by playing so many shows in 1976. They played 2 shows in Paris, so they did a total in 76, which is a lot of shows. Compared to 1977, they only did 17 shows in Britain. But a lot of those were private shows or shows where they were booked as the Spots. That was the one that I missed that I could have gone to in Wolverhampton. And so a lot of those 17 shows in 77 were, about half of them were either private, like when they were on the boat, or shows where they were advertised under a different name. They played 21 shows in Holland and Sweden, so they actually played a lot more shows in Holland and Sweden. And one of my favorite quotes is by Marco Perroni. He said, who was the original guitar player in obviously Susie and the Banshees, and then went on to play with Adam and the Ants. And he said that when he saw like early Bowie in the 70s, he said that he the thought never crossed his mind of, oh, I could do that, I want to be in a band. But he said that it was so different with the Sex Pistols, and it's not that they weren't just as talented, but he said that when you saw the Sex Pistols early on, that was your first thought, like, I want to be in a band, I want to try that, I can do that. And that's exactly what he did, and so many others. I mean, when I think of the bands that were directly influenced inspired to start up because of the Sex Pistols, I mean, it's amazing. Susie and the Banshees, the Slits, obviously Adam and the Ants, Generation X with Billy Idol, and then also The Clash, because Joe Strummer was in the 101ers, and when he saw the Sex Pistols, he quit that and kind of wanted to go in a more punk direction, and started the Clash with obviously Mick Jones. So I just think that's amazing. They not only had great music, the Sex Pistols, but they inspired so many other different bands, and some of the bands they inspired didn't even sound like them. And one of those bands I wanted to mention was Joy Division. I'll show some pictures here of their legendary gig, or actually there were several legendary gigs, but the first two were in June. It was actually, I'm sorry, I'm just looking through my notes. It was in June 4th at the Lesser Free Trade Hall in Manchester, and then they came back later and played the same venue July 20th in 76. They had so many shows in 1976. God, I wish I could go back in time. So I'm going to show a few photos here from that first legendary show in Manchester on June 4th. And I just want to read a passage here of from this great book that I bought just for £5 at Rough Trade. And it's Peter Hook, Unknown Pleasures Inside Joy Division. I love Joy Division and Peter Hook. And I just want to read a passage here of what he says about seeing the Sex Pistols that night in June in 1976. Now this is from Peter Hook's book. So June 4th, 1976. Very few attended, 50 at most. And yet it's the subject of a book, That Gig That Changed the World by David Nolan. Among those who were definitely at the gig, Peter Hook and Bernard Dicken, who went on to form Joy Division New Order. Stephen Morrissey, who went on to form the Smiths. Mark E. Smith, who went on to form the Fall. Mick Hucknall. I never knew Mick Hucknall had a punk band. Mick Hucknall, who went on to form the Frantic Elevators and Simply Red. And then also was attended by writer Paul Morley. And I'll just, that's just a description of the show. And then I'll just read in Peter Hook's own words of how he felt about the show. The Sex Pistols gear was set up. Now apparently the Buzzcocks were supposed to open. They had seen the Sex Pistols already, and they were also inspired by them, but apparently they weren't ready to play. They wanted to open up for them. They weren't ready to play, so a band called Solstice opened up. So the Buzzcocks is another band that was inspired by the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols, this is Peter Hook writing, the Sex Pistols gear was set up, and then without further ceremony they came on. Rotten had on this torn open yellow sweater, and he glared out in the audience like he wanted to kill each and every one of us, one at a time, before the band struck up into something that might have been Did You Know Ron, but I couldn't tell because it was so distorted. I remember feeling as if I'd been sitting in a quiet room all my life, comfortable and warm and safe and quiet, and then all of a sudden someone had kicked the door in, and it had burst open to let in an intense bright light, and even more intense noise, showing me another world, another life, a way out. I was immediately no longer comfortable and safe. But that didn't matter because it felt great. I felt like I was alive. It was the weirdest sensation. It wasn't just feeling it either. We were all like that. We just stood there, stock still, watching the Pistols, absolutely, utterly gobsmacked. I was thinking two things that I suppose you'd have to say came together to create my future, my whole life from then on. The first was, I could do that. I love that. He never really thought that he could sort of be in a band or be in a band like that. I love that. And then he goes on to say, the Pistols were on for only about half an hour, and then when they were finished, we filed out quietly with our minds blown, absolutely, utterly speechless. And it just sort of dawned on me then. That was it. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell everyone to fuck off. I love that. I love this book by Peter Hook. So so the Sex Pistols, they not only inspired during those 68 shows. It's really 68 shows that changed the world forever. During those during that show in June in Manchester, they had already inspired the Buzzcocks, and they inspired Joy Division, the Fall, the Smiths. I mean, it just and those are just the sort of the ones that went on to be super famous. I really don't know what punk rock would have been without them crisscrossing Great Britain, going up and down frantically, it seemed, in a van all over Great Britain to do their set and to spread their music in whatever town that would have them. And I'm sure on September 24th, there was only 40 people or so in that audience, like most of their gigs in 1976. There was only a few people in the audience, but I wouldn't be surprised of those 40, there was probably a handful that said to each other, I think we can do this. Let's start a band. And that's just something that is, it's indescribable what they did. So during that year, as I said, these 4 guys probably rolled into a town near you if you live in Britain, and maybe they inspired obviously bands that became super famous, but I think they inspired a lot of bands that were very talented as well, and maybe we just don't know about them, but who got up on stage just because of these 4 guys. So I hope you like the video, and I think I'm gonna go and play the album again. This Sex Pistols Burton-on-Trent. I love it. It's funny they have Sid on the cover. He wasn't in the band then. I think I'm gonna go play this album and think about that night 48 years ago today. Thanks for watching. As always, I'll be seeing you.